Before I begin, I need to do a brief survey. This is a survey by the uplifting of hands. So, no speaking out. Do we have any dog people? Any dog people here? Okay. And it's okay to vote for more than one thing. Okay, good. I'm a dog person too. Do we have any cat people here? Okay, good. I'm a cat person too. It's okay to be both. You can like both cats and dogs. I've talked about cats before. Today is dogs' turns. Bird's Nest was a very good dog. I never actually met Bird's Nest. I heard little snippets about him. As a matter of fact, the only thing I know is that he was a much-loved pet. That's all that I know, because the person who I heard talk about him as the family dog in his childhood spoke fondly of Bird Nest. And that's it. That's all I know. But I can safely say Bird Nest was a good dog, because I've known other dogs. I've known other dogs that became that loved member of the family, that part that could not be done without. And by ascribing some things that I know about other dogs to Bird Nest, I can tell you something about him. Nothing specific, but I can tell you something. For instance, I did know Felix. Not Felix the cat, Felix the dog. And I can tell you a bit more about Felix, because I knew Felix quite well. Once upon a time, that's how stories start. Once upon a time, a young college co-ed was driving along a busy 4-lane, and she saw in the margin this dog, and she decided she must rescue this dog. She took the dog in her car and gave the dog his name, Felix, and then proceeded to drive 4 hours with Felix home. Now, her father said, under no circumstances will this dog be living in my house, and you can't have a dog in your dormitory, so you better find a home for Felix, or whatever he wants to do. Felix was a Tennessee coonhound. I think he was about 70 pounds at that point, a little thin around the midsection. I know this story so well because the young lady was my sister, and the man who swore, her father, who swore this dog would not be a part of their household, was also my father. And Felix and my dad went on to be inseparable. For many years, Felix was always with my father at his side, and there was no denying that Felix was my dad's dog. Felix was a good dog, and as we gather on this Easter Sunday morning, I'm sure some of you are surprised. I was starting talking about dogs. We're going to get to the empty tomb right now. As we gather here, we celebrate something that we didn't see. We celebrate an event at which we were not present. As a matter of fact, we celebrate something on Easter that no one saw, because it happened in the Gospels before they arrived. We celebrate the account of people who witnessed something. As a matter of fact, they witnessed not seeing something. They witnessed arriving with the expectation that the spices that they brought, with the preparations that they had made that would be used to prepare Jesus' body for burial. They arrived with the expectation of finality. Death had overcome it. That's the message of Good Friday. Jesus died. We have the cross as a constant reminder of Jesus' death and who he died for. He died for us. As we gather, we remember this. We remember their expectation as they went along the road. They expected to find him in the tomb. But as is the case, sometimes, maybe many times, maybe all the times with God, we should tread carefully when we start to make assumptions, when we start to bring our expectations to God and lay them at the divine feet. Because it didn't play out that way. It didn't play out the way that they expected it to go. They came in expecting to find something, and what we're actually celebrating is the fact that they found nothing. We're here to remember the emptiness, the darkness, the fact that there was not a body in the tomb. We're here to remember the fact that they came in and Jesus wasn't there. He had died on Friday too quickly. It happened too fast. They didn't get a chance to prepare him, so they had to wait. They had to wait through the Sabbath. And the Sabbath came and they waited. What we expected to happen didn't necessarily happen. Instead of palm waving and fireworks, like Jesus' entry into Jerusalem that we remember last week, every year on Palm Sunday, the Hosannas, it's recounted in Mark 10. Instead of that great, glorious, powerful triumphalism, Holy Week went very differently. Holy Week played out quite a bit different than our expectations of it. Jesus was betrayed. We remember that on Monday, Thursday. He was turned over to the Romans, and they crucified him. And he died. Before we get too eager to point our fingers, we would have done the same thing had we been there. That's part of the message of Holy Week. That's part of the message of this time of the year. We participate in that every single day through things that we do, things that we don't do, things that we think, things that we should do but don't do. Every time we fall short of God's divine glory, every time we fall short of God's divine perfection, we crucify Christ all over again, and we are complicit and we participate with those elements. Every single day. We are used to occasions on which we celebrate something. We're used to reading the Bible and seeing Jesus do something or say something or interact with someone. And we remember what he did do, not the emptiness of the tomb. We remember when Jesus said something. For instance, in Mark 10, Jesus and his disciples and the crowd who were with him were passing a blind man. Mark gives him the name Bartimaeus. It's only the second of the named recipients of a miracle in Mark. And Bartimaeus calls out to Jesus. Now, I don't know what it's like to be blind, but I can imagine that it is very difficult to have any kind of physical handicap. And I can imagine that it was especially difficult to have a handicap in the first century. Not because I was there, but because I've read about it. And I can imagine it. I can imagine the courage with which Bartimaeus must have exercised to call out, even though people were pushing back against him and saying, don't call out, don't bother Jesus, don't talk to him. Not because I saw the courage, not because the gospel tells us about the courage, but because I've seen other courageous acts. And by having witnessed other courageous acts, I can realize the courage that it took to call out. And what did Bartimaeus say? He said, I want to see again. And Jesus said, go, your faith has made you whole. We're used to a message like that in the gospel where something happens. There's an exchange. We read it. We study it. We draw out implications for our lives, like live compassionately, listen to others when they call out, and so on. The more we read some of these passages, the lessons seem to multiply. But the empty tomb is different. No one really does anything. They arrive and the tomb is already empty. Whatever happened has already happened. What does that mean for our lives? Early that morning, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, went out shopping. They bought some spices so that they may go to the tomb and anoint Jesus' body. As they went along, they were thinking to themselves, how are we going to roll this stone away? It's so heavy, it's so big, and we're so small. And then they looked up and saw the stone had already been rolled away. What an interesting experience. That alone would have been shocking in and of itself. But they went in. If you ask me, I think that was quite a brave thing to do. Their expectations were shaken, no stone. They entered, and as they entered, they saw a young man dressed in white. And he said, "Don't be afraid. You were looking for Jesus of Nazareth, weren't you? Well, he's not here. He's been raised." We live out a faith based on an event in which we weren't present. I saw Sparky as an old dog. She was grouchy and irascible. I couldn't imagine Sparky being the best of pets. But my wife, whom I trust completely, tells me about what a fine dog Sparky was, and what a great family pet she was growing up. When I saw Sparky, she was old. I don't doubt that Sparky was a wonderful pet, as she tells me the stories of different times that she had with her dog, the dog of her childhood. I believe it, even though I didn't witness it, because I trust the testimony of the one who shares it with me. Likewise, we trust the testimony of others who have gone before us. We celebrate the empty tomb because of what our parents, our teachers, our pastors have said to us. We celebrate the empty tomb because we've seen it in other people's lives. We've witnessed it. The testimony lives on because the miracle of that empty tomb flows through us when we live it out. The women found that tomb empty on the first Easter morning. I wonder how often we let comfort take the central place in our faith journeys. See, it's easy to focus on the man that they saw, because the Bible tells us different things in different Gospels. Mark just says they saw a man wearing white. Matthew's quite a bit more explicit. It was an angel. Luke tells us it was dazzling white. Sort of the hyperbole of so white you can't imagine how white it was. And John, we heard, talks about angels. There were two in John. It's easy to focus on that and think about it. But the truth is, it was an empty tomb. That's the miracle. That's the wonder. And in the empty tomb, they left, and according to Mark, what we read in this account, they left in terror and amazement. I mentioned comfort just a second ago. We focus on comfort. We get all irritated if the HVAC system is acting up and it's either too hot or too cold, or if the cushions are lumpy. We focus on comfort quite a bit, especially in our faith journeys, instead of letting a little terror creep in every now and then. We want to be comfortable. Of course, terror isn't that great, but we get so caught up in maintaining comfort and comfortable lives that it becomes easy to miss the beauty and the wonder, the amazement of this empty tomb. And even yes, a little bit of terror. God loves us. I don't think it's something that is at all a risk in saying God loves us so much. Part of the reason I can say that is because God does love everyone. As Christians celebrating this empty tomb of Easter, we want to hear about the glorious post-resurrection appearances. We want to rush ahead to the angels and see Jesus appear in the upper room with the disciples, appear with the two disciples who are walking on the road to Emmaus. We want to get ahead of ourselves. But before we do, we have to pause for a moment. We're not quite there yet. We're still on Easter morning. And right now, in this Easter, we're in the quiet and coolness of that garden. And we remember the empty tomb and consider what it means for us, what it means for our lives each and every single day. It means living as though we know a Christ who we have never seen in the flesh, but have experienced over and over again through other people. It means living as though we have experienced the empty tomb. It means embracing that little bit of mystery, whatever happened before the women arrived, before the Bible picks up the story again. It means embracing the beauty of God's world, God's love, and God's surrounding us. And it even means allowing a little bit of that terror into our lives. It means living as though we know. A dog like Bird Nest. Even though we've never met him, we've known other dogs. We've known people who have dogs. We've known people who really hold up that idea of what is often called man's best friend. Even if we ourselves, for those of you who didn't raise your hand, are not dog people. We know Jesus. We know the one who rose from the cross. We know the one who does appear after that empty tomb. And we celebrate that today. If we only look around, we can find glimpses of the beauty. We can find glimpses of that wonder. We can find that amazement. And we can find a little bit of terror every now and then. Jesus' presence in the world today. You know why? The reason we can do that is because he is